So it's an absolute honor to be here tonight. I'm very, very excited to be able to address you and to discuss this topic of negotiation with you. I've been negotiating my name for all my life. Yeah, and people mispronouncing it because I come from a Persian Iranian background, and my name is Samineh, but I grew up in the diaspora, so in the United States, Canada, and the UK. And when I was 8 years old, one of my little friends, her name was Heidi Beauregard. By the time she wanted to say what she wanted to say, she said, "Oh, you know what? I can't say your name, so I'm going to call you Sam from now on." So the negotiation there was kind of inflicted onto me, and she decided Samineh wasn't going to work for her, and I was stuck with the nickname Sam. So I'd be happy for you to call me Sam as well, if you'd like. I'm a cross-cultural psychologist, and I've been involved in learning and development for the last 20 years in my career. I've been lecturing at university for the same amount of time, and it's been about 10 or 12 years that I've been involved in corporate work. So I go to different organizations and I design and implement learning and development programs for organizations. I moved back to the UAE in 2010, and I say back because my family have been living here since 1985 while I was living in London. And since then, I have a weekly column in Khalij Times called Out of Mind, or Psych Central. I write for the Huffington Post. I'm on Dubai I 103.8 with Suzanne Radford in Kaleidoscope, or it used to be called Voices of Diversity, and a wide range of other activities that I'd love to talk to you about when time permits. If I can just add to that, I think in order to display that kind of confidence and perhaps sort of determination in negotiation, one needs to have mastered the internal negotiation with self. And that means my values, my goals, what does this subject mean to me? How important is it? And it's through that negotiation, the internal negotiation that we have with ourselves, I think that you're able to display that kind of power and determination and persistence. So we've got internal negotiations going all the time, but they're not managed very well. And I think if we learn to better manage those, definitely our negotiations with others will be much more productive. Yeah, just because in connection to what Bill is saying about mindsets, and traditionally we go for, I want to win this negotiation. And we're much more moving towards not a win-lose situation, but a win-win situation. And so if we kind of silence the reptilian part of the brain that wants to be safe and survive, and move more towards the part of the brain that wants to maybe collaborate, trust, and thrive, then we think of a more win-win situation. And if that's communicated and both parties are of that mindset, then perhaps more can be accomplished, rather than if we go in with, I want to win and somebody else is going to lose. Well, there goes my argument about win-win scenario, right? That just went out the window after that clip. But I think linking it back to what we were talking about before, the greats like Gandhi and Mandela, I think there's a lot of diversity in character and context when it comes to negotiation. And so, yes, Hollywood portrays, the aggressive type of person that negotiates with force or in these kinds of situations, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. There are a set of practices that are learnable, and that's why I prefer it to be more a science of negotiation rather than an art, because there are measurable and observable traits and characteristics and practices that one can engage in to be a better negotiator. But certainly, the more volatile, the more emotive and high sort of emotional energy that's attached to a situation, that would influence the outcome of negotiation differently. I think it's important, first of all, to really understand the differences amongst cultures. And so, you've described America, that's a very low context culture. Iran is a high context culture, which means that their behavior varies according to context. And the low context cultures, they don't vary as much. In the low context culture, they're very direct. They say what they mean and they mean what they say. The high context culture, the Iranians, they want to sit and talk about you and your family for about 15-20 minutes before they get into the discussion, right? And so oftentimes when people are not aware of these cultural nuances and differences, they're very awkward and they kind of just stumble and blunder into these situations without managing it correctly. So really understanding, what does nonverbal communication look like in that culture? If a person is silent for 30 seconds, what does it mean? We're so uncomfortable in sort of Western training with silence. And I don't mean to generalize, but there are Eastern philosophies that are a little bit more comfortable with silence, and that shows that they're thinking and they're reflecting. What does that mean? Do we think, oh, we've lost the deal, so we start making counter offers, but to stay quiet and to think a little bit further? What about the use of time? Monochronic versus polychronic use of time. In negotiations in these cultures that are more collective, like Iran, your negotiations might be interrupted 5, 7, 20 times with people coming in, phone calls, and so on. Whereas in monochronic negotiations, it's very focused and straight and to the point and directive. And so if you're not aware of these differences, you might take offense, you might feel disrespected, and then we go into that internal talk, and you might say or do things that affect your negotiation because you're not ready for those differences. So EQ is very important. Just real quick, I think, adapting is really important. The technological world is like a new culture, and the new generation, they're locals, they're natives to that culture, and we're immigrants. And then there's refugees. My parents' generation, they're like refugees. They've been thrown in there. They don't want to be there. They stare at the Skype screen. They don't talk, and they don't know how exactly it works. And but regardless of the fact, there are immigrants now working with locals in the technological world, and we have to understand and adapt to the fact that who are we negotiating with, and if their personality is that they're more introverted. Introverts prefer written communication. So really to go a little bit deeper than what's on the surface, and there's no right formula every time, and to be adaptable to that. Apparently there are more male leaders called John than women leaders, apparently. That's just a fact. I guess we need to start calling our girls John, perhaps. Maybe they'll get promoted. It's a very complex topic, and I would not do it justice. My colleague did very well with the way she answered. I think really women ask, and the research says they get rejected. We hear no more often. Men dispense no's, and they're the ones in position of leaders more often to women than they do to their male counterparts. So first of all, the woman's nonverbal communication can be softer, okay? And that often is seen as less assertive. And the fact that, women are known to be more aware of ecological variables. So a lot of people are out of jobs. It might be a downturn in the economy, and therefore, you should be grateful that you even have a job interview. And all these factors play on a woman's head, as well as, I don't know if you're aware of the imposter syndrome and, the things that we might struggle with that we don't have time to get into right now. But there is a difference, and it is getting better. And I think in the same way that men do their homework and prepare for an interview, there shouldn't be any difference there. And as long as we play up to those differences, they'll be taken advantage of. So I think for me, what's really important is a shift in mindset. Some people think that, being a good communicator or negotiator is a talent. I think it's a skill that can be developed with deliberate practice. So move away from this idea that I'm just not good at it, or I'm going to stay away from negotiation or that kind of communication, because the more you practice, the better you get at it. And it's not a talent; it's a skill that gets developed.